Good evening, everyone. Can y'all hear me? It's a privilege and an honor to be here tonight. This is one of the most diverse forums I have seen since I moved to the Twin Cities in 2003. So you guys need to give yourselves a hand, because I know you could have been doing something else tonight, but it was important for us to be here because one of these individuals will be the next mayor of the city of Minneapolis. And they need to know what's on the hearts and minds of the people. I like to think of this as a forum that's by the people and for the people. Now, many of us have heard in the news about the disparities that we're experiencing. In some ways, I think of Minneapolis as a tale of two cities. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And unfortunately, for many of our communities of color, we're experiencing the worst of times. That's right. So our new mayor is going to have to understand what is happening in our poorest communities. They're going to have to understand how we have the largest gap in unemployment between blacks and whites in the nation. They're going to have to understand that we have one of the highest rates of racial disparity in public education. They're going to have to understand that we have high rates of contact between law enforcement and African American men. And even today, in our community, we're mourning the loss of Terrence Franklin. Our mayor is going to have to understand the pain that we feel as a result of these losses of our young men. The next mayor is going to have to understand that there is not enough affordable housing within our community. And how all of these things taken together have caused a crisis, the worst of times. It's caused a great deal of stress and frustration in our community. Our next mayor is going to have to rise to the challenge of helping to identify solutions to addressing these challenges, not alone, but in collaboration with communities of color and our allies, just like those who are sitting here today. So tonight you'll have a chance to hear from our candidates for mayor. They will each have 1 minute to respond to the questions that are going to be posed by our esteemed panel sitting up front. And I've been given the liberty to intervene if a question needs to be posed differently or if we need further elaboration from any of our panelists. In fact, I think they chose me because I'm not Minnesota nice. I'm from South Central LA, so I'm LA nice. But I'm excited about being here, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to our esteemed candidates, and I'm going to ask them to each take 1.5 minutes to give an opening statement. We'll start with you, Tony.
Good evening. My name is Tony Lane. I'm the Socialist Workers candidate for mayor. I'm a factory worker. I work in a steel service center. I want to thank the organizers for the program for having this event tonight. Through the last 6 years, rulers have put the economic crisis on the backs of working people. We've seen unending joblessness, cuts in hours and wages, speed up on the job, home foreclosures, loss of unemployment benefits, different attacks by the bosses, like the use of lockouts. And this is a crisis that's affecting working people across the board. It's coming harshest down on blacks, African Americans, Latinos, and so on, but it's hitting working people as a whole. And we're for working people organizing together against this. So we're for working people starting with that framework. Organize independently of the bosses' parties and put forward a program of action. Number one for us is the question of jobs. And in the campaign flyer, which I have copies of here, I say, as mayor, my first priority will be to mobilise city funds to put thousands back to work at union scale. I've got more to say. I'll talk to you later. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Andrew, and I want to welcome you to one of the most economically and racially segregated cities in America. And if that statement makes you angry, it made me angry enough to want to run to be your mayor of Minneapolis so we can address these equity questions and make sure that we are a city that we were born to be, that we were meant to be a city of justice and fairness and equity. And I am running for mayor in part on these issues and in part because the city of Minneapolis has given me everything in my life. I've given my life to this city and it has given me everything back in return. I was born here. My mother went to junior high school here. My children went to public schools. I was a community organizer in this city. I was elected 5 times to the Hennepin County Board of Commissioners in this city. I've been in this auditorium dozens of times talking about justice, talking about the issues we care about. I am running for mayor to accomplish 3 things. 1, make Minneapolis the greenest city in America. It is an equity issue. It is an economic justice issue. Number 2, attack the achievement gap, the opportunity gap, the wage gap, and the housing gap in our city. And number 3, develop an economic development program that is all about equity, jobs, 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 expanding our tax base and attracting 100,000 more people back into the city of Minneapolis over the next 20 years. Thank you. I'm Mark Andrew. I want to be your mayor.
My name's Gary Schiff, and I'm running for mayor because I believe Minneapolis can't be considered the most progressive city in the country until every neighborhood makes progress. I'm the youngest of 6 kids. I'm a product of the public schools, and for the last 12 years on the Minneapolis City Council, I've had the amazing opportunity to represent a district different than any other ward in the city. The district I've represented includes the Phillips neighborhood, the Powderhorn neighborhood, the Longfellow neighborhood, an area where 50% of the people are people of color, 50% are renters, and half the children grow up under the federal poverty line. I have seen the progress we can make when we come together as progressives. Whether it's the work that Little Earth of United Tribes has done to make sure that kids who grow up in Little Earth get an opportunity to go to college, or the work that we've done to welcome people from Somalia who come here to start a new life. Let's face it, when you represent Lake Street, you've represented the world. As mayor, I will put Minneapolis first and make sure that city residents get jobs on city projects that are paid for with your tax dollars. That is how we will put people to work, and that is how we will decrease racial unemployment disparities. I will put our kids first. I will stop the revolving cuts to children's programs by putting it into a trust fund for early childhood education to make sure that every child has an opportunity, that every child has the opportunity to do better. I can't wait to talk to you more to this debate. Thank you for being here.
Good evening, I'm Don Samuels. I want to be your next mayor. As I look down in the audience today, this is the block I live on, right here. I live in Jordan neighborhood. My wife and I moved in 16 years ago to the sound of gunshots and violence, drug dealing, and all of the fallout of the failure of our public school system. That's what we lived. And we moved in for that purpose, to make a difference, to join with our neighbors and to change our neighborhood. And we transformed the blocks we lived around so successfully that my neighbors asked me to run for office. The neighbor who asked me to run lived across the street. He said, I've got 50 kids in our church's after-school program, and we think 2 of them may graduate. He said, I've called the mayor's office, I've called the governor's office, and they don't get the direction our country is heading in. He said, Don, you've got to run. And so my presence here today is a fulfillment of that charge. and a fulfillment of the dream to have the opportunity to go into the mayor's office to finally bring to Minneapolis a promise that this nation has made to its citizens, that all people are equal and will achieve equality. It's not good enough to say we are equal in theory, that we were all born with rights. We must look at the outcomes and say, looking at the outcomes, are we truly equal? Are we truly equal at the end of the day? When there's an employment gap and a housing gap, are we truly equal when we have the lowest achievement for African Americans, second lowest in the country, and the worst for Native and for Hispanics in the entire country? If you let me for mayor, I will lead the charge on these changes. I look forward to your support. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jim Thomas. I'm a teacher running for mayor because Minneapolis is failing to make the grade for too many of our citizens. We've had a lot of talk about what's not going right, and we've had a lot of people who have been in office a lot of years telling us that they're going to make it better when they've been in office a long time. How come it's not been better while they've been in office? Okay? We need some change. What I think we need to do is we need to work on going back to the neighborhoods. Neighborhoods, stronger schools, and better job opportunities. In terms of neighborhoods, I want to see us putting a lot of resources back into the neighborhood community to say, what do you think needs to be done? You're living there. You know what needs to be done. We need you to help us make these decisions. So we need to fund you. We need to collaborate with you and make those decisions happen. The neighborhoods, lots of issues like homes, foreclosures, people who don't have a place to live, can't have living wages. We need to do a lot of things differently. If we had just talking about raising the minimum wage from a current level to about $10.50 an hour, people would have a whole lot better lives right now. They could afford a lot more. So I've got 16 seconds here. I want to also ask you to have all the candidates specifically talk about issues about schools, because Don and I agree that it's not working, but we have big disagreements on the solution. So I welcome the opportunity to talk to you more, and I want you to ask them specific questions about things I'll talk about later. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Doug Mann. I'm seeking the Green Party endorsement. Racial segregation and inequality persist because of systemic racial discrimination that is driven by laws and public policies. 3 examples. 1, the so-called war on drugs serves to criminalize and marginalize people of color due to unequal enforcement of drug laws. 2, there is widespread, covert, illegal discrimination in the housing and job markets. But no government agencies are empowered to detect and prosecute the discriminators. And 3, K-12 students of color are more heavily exposed than whites to inexperienced teachers and watered-down curriculum. Corporate-style reforms and charterization are the means to reinvent a separate and unequal school system, not a means to fix it. And finally, our tax money should be spent on human needs to promote human rights and not corporate welfare.
Hello, One Minneapolis. I am Betsy Hodges. I am running for mayor of Minneapolis, and I am so pleased to be here tonight to talk about issues of racial equity, to talk about economic justice. They have been at the center of my life's work, and they are crucial to the future of Minneapolis and deciding who we are as a people and where we want to go together. And you're going to hear a lot of promises tonight. There's a lot of politicians up here. I'm going to make some commitments myself. You are going to hear from me all about policies that I believe in as I answer questions and if we have conversations after this. But I'm going to ask you to ask yourselves, as you are listening to all of us talk, who's really going to come through, who has put racial justice and economic equity at the center of her life. And I offer myself to you as that candidate. That from the time that I started the Project for Women at New Mexico Aid Services, through my time at City Hall fighting for police accountability, a strong civil rights department, through my time this winter on the strike line with SEIU and Seitul. Thank you. And I also ask you to say, who is surrounding her? Who is supporting her? Who is guiding her? There is a reason I am supported by Dr. Josie Johnson, by Senator Scott Dibble, by Gary Cunningham, who I'm married to, Laura Waterman-Wittstock, Frank Brown, John A. Powell, Donna Cassett, Peggy Flanagan, Representative Susan Allen, Javier Morillo, SEIU, the African American Caucus, the Latino Caucus. Tonight there will be a lot of promises made. Tonight there will be a lot of promises made. And I ask for your support for Mayor as I do, as we move forward together. Thank you for that extra time.
This has got to be one of the most exciting rooms I've been in. We have done a bunch of forums. None of them have been like this. So congratulations to everybody who organized this. This is incredible. I'm Jackie Cherryhomes, and I'm running for mayor of Minneapolis. I'm running to build a city that works for each and every one of us. You know, all my life I've looked at things through the lens of justice, equality, and opportunity, and that's the lens I will use as mayor. We talk a lot about being progressive, but you know what? We need to quit lying. We are not progressive, and we're never going to address the issues that face our city unless we're open, we're honest, we quit sweeping things under the rug, and we really develop a clear, cohesive plan and work together to deal with these issues. I'm running to build a city where every child has a bright future, where everybody can start a business, where transit connects us and where we have jobs, where everybody's working, everybody is housed, and everybody has a safe community. That's what I'm running for. Now, I could tell you a whole lot of stuff about me, but that's not what you're here for tonight. You deserve specifics. You don't need to know what I did. You need to know what I'm going to do. And that's what I hope we're here to talk about tonight, to tell you what we're going to do as we lead this city forward. And I promise to you, I will work with you to build a city where everybody thrives and a city where justice prevails.
Wonderful. So we've had a chance now to hear opening statements from each of our candidates. Next, we will start the portion of this event in which a name will be randomly chosen, and one of our esteemed panelists will ask a question, and we're going to start with Donata as the first person to ask a question.
The first candidate we're going to hear from is Mark Andrews. And the second will be Betsy Hodges.
Hi, my name is Donata Hobber. Me being former homeless and my peers being homeless, we have nowhere to go but downtown. Downtown is our community, is where we feel safe. As we walk and hang out downtown, we have a great chance of being harassed or arrested. This is something I have seen in my own personal experience. We can't be in our community hanging out with our friends where we feel safe or even try to apply for a job. As mayor, how will you work with the people from the community, businesses, and downtown improvement district to find opportunities for the population who have been shut out? How can we make downtown work for the youth, businesses, and the homeless?
Thank you for that question. I've spent much of my political and personal life working on behalf of those who live in the shadows of our community. As Hennepin County Commissioner, I was the creator of a collaboration between Minneapolis and Hennepin County called the City-County Homeless Task Force. Today, it's called Heading Home Hennepin. It's still in existence. I worked also very closely with the Old Bridge for Runaway Youth, which focused on programs for young people who ran away, couldn't live at home, or some other circumstance precluded them from being at home. This is not just a city problem. This is a city problem, a county problem, a schools problem, and a family problem. And as the only candidate here who spent 16 years on the Hennepin County Board of Commissioners, I will build the relationships with the county, indeed already have them, so that we can put together a cohesive, thoughtful program that is aimed at humanity, advancement, and self-sufficiency.
Before Ms. Hodges answers the question, I'd like for Mr. Andrew to go back a little bit. We need some more specifics about what needs to happen to address these challenges. As the young man said, Donata said, going downtown is a safe place, but now our young people are being arrested, they're being given citations. So we need to know what specifically you will do to address this issue.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, we need to have available more shelters that are safe and accessible without any stigma, without any risk. Secondly, we need to have a turbocharged effort between the city, the police department, particularly the police department, and the county aimed at reunification. A lot of these kids are going to be able eventually to go back home, and some of them can never go back home because the family life is not safe. Believe it or not, for some of our homeless youth, it's safer to be on the streets. And so we need to work with the county. This is mostly a city police and county function. We will work with the county to advance their commitments to homeless youth. It is very disorganized. The relationship between the city and the county is very disorganized. I will bring those entities together. We will build those resources, we'll provide them, and we will deliver them.
Quick housekeeping question. Are the follow-ups 1 minute or 30 seconds? 1 minute?
If it goes over, you don't need to time the follow-up.
Thank you for the question. Thank you in particular. And I'm sorry about what you've been facing. And I'm sorry that we don't yet have all the solutions that you need. When I am mayor, I already, as a city council member, recognize that the issues that we are facing downtown are housing issues, they are police accountability issues, and they are job opportunity issues. I have been working on the police accountability issues since the second I got on the city council, working to to make sure that our CRA worked well, making sure to hold our police chief accountable. We can talk more about that. That needs to continue to happen. The other thing that needs to continue to happen are the conversations that folks have been having at the downtown, with the downtown business leaders and other folks talking about 7th and Nicollet. I mean, let's be honest, that's one of the places we're talking about here. And I have asked on more than one occasion for business leaders downtown to put some skin in the game, to have outreach, outreach workers like we've had with Henning Home Hennepin, whose executive committee I serve on, to help link people with the opportunities that already exist. To help link people with the opportunities that already exist instead of sicking the police on them. I have a lot more to say on this topic, but I do not have a lot more time.
Thank you. Next, we'll have a question by Alex.
Hello, my name is Alex. Okay, so the majority of youth receiving services from homeless serving agencies are youth of color. We acknowledge that building more shelters does not reduce homelessness, but rather creating more affordable housing will. With that said, there's a growing need in North Minneapolis and downtown for safe youth shelters. There have been council members who have been openly public about opposing these new shelters. There are less than 100 youth shelter beds in Minneapolis. What have you done? What are you going to do? And how do you plan on ending youth homelessness in Minneapolis?
The first response will come from candidate Jim Thomas, and the second one from candidate Gary Schiff.
Youth homelessness, what have I done? Our family has taken folks in, including youth, to live in our homes in our house for a period of time. I've taken, and we've done it on multiple occasions. What am I going to do? Well, I think we need to look at all the factors that go into being homeless, and if we can open up homeless shelters, I would favor more homeless shelters. I would favor that. There's also a program where families agree to take youth for a long period of time if they are homeless, and there's a program, and I forget what it's called, but you have to go through training and you're screened. Okay. So that would be trying to support organizations like that and expand that kind of program. And what was the third part of the question? Affordable housing. In Minneapolis, in the schools, it would be really helpful if we had vocational kinds of programs for youth to try to get training before they, when they can follow their interests early on. Because not everybody, let's face it, really wants to go to college. They have other interests. It's great if they want to go. Okay, thank you.
I believe the city of Minneapolis must be held accountable for reducing youth homelessness. And here's how we do that. The city of Minneapolis must work with the county to make sure that we are creating more spaces for youth to stay. I am very critical, and I am the most outspoken council member of our current policy that only allows shelters to open as an accessory use to a place of religious worship. That's wrong. We should allow organizations like YouthLink to open a shelter. We should allow places like Sabathany. We should allow anybody who's doing work, social services, to help people get up in their life, to get back on track. That's where we need to partner in the future. We cannot continue to make shelters just an issue for communities of faith. So as city council member, yes, I will vote for a zoning code change to see that social service agencies can help us house our youth and help be part of the solution in ending homelessness. I will also make sure that we are tracking our progress. This year, the city of Minneapolis pulled out funding for a BEST program to end youth homelessness. That's an outrage.
All right. Next, we're going to hear from candidate Tony Lane, and followed up by Don Samuels.
Hasim is going to pose a question.
Cedar Riverside is surrounded by roughly 2,000 youth that lives within 1 mile radius. We all know that both the right resources and education form a perfect and successful community. We all know that investing in quality education and community resources offer more opportunities to become successful in the future. We know that when you learn, you grow socially, emotionally, and most importantly, economically. As a future mayor, what is your vision and goal in investing in Somali community, especially the lack of resources in all youth? Please don't tell us what you are going to do. Please tell us, how are you going to do?
One thing I just wanted to start with is everybody up here is talking about Minneapolis, how they're going to change it, and so on. That's not going to happen. The problems that Minneapolis face, the problems that working people face across the country and in the world. What we're for is strengthening the ability of working people to fight and act in our defense and to speak the truth about what's happening. One of the things that our campaign has spoken the truth about is not just what the police do here in terms of their actions against the young African Americans and so on. We've also spoken the truth about what the FBI has done against the Somali community. It's part of working people having interests in the world. We think that through what I think is most important is the actions that working people and young people take. I would point to some of the things that are coming up. One thing is that in a few days' time there's going to be a rally at City Hall around the Terrence Franklin case. That's a way that we can strengthen ourselves.
I'm sorry, I have to intervene again. That was a great answer, but the question was related to, as the future mayor, what's your vision and goals in investing in the Somali community, especially the youth? So if you can give some specifics around that, that would be wonderful.
Thank you.
Well, as I mentioned in the opening piece, the most important thing is for working people to be able to act together and in our common interests. And the number one question is the jobs question. That's what I said, that my first priority would be to use all city funds available to launch a jobs campaign. That's the way to tackle all these things. It opens up the ability for working people, young people to act with confidence. That's what's going to change things, not somebody who says they're going to reform things. I'm not fighting for reforms. I'm fighting for changing the system from top to bottom. I point to the example of Cuba as a way that you can do that. And I want to give all confidence to anyone who wants to fight against the way things are. That's what my campaign is about.
I've been obsessed with education all my life. It's the only way I got where I am today, coming from a poor community in a third world country, clawing my way up through education. And so I understand the value of that, coming here to go to college and then staying to become Senior Director of Research and Development for a Fortune 500 company. And so I'm going to reach out to our young people in a way that no mayor has. I have tutored young people in the St. Paul School District for 3 years, every Saturday morning for 3 hours. No other council member has put in that kind of time. So I'm going to walk into the Somali community, into Cedar Riverside, and I'm going to start to inspire those young people, and we're going to organize the young people of the city, and so that they can have a new relationship with the city. I'm going to have young people presenting to the city council on a city council cycle. Every council meeting, we need to hear something from the young people of the city. They shouldn't have to call us to a meeting. We should be calling them to our meeting.
I would like to have a follow-up question because I personally feel that my question is not addressed.
Go ahead.
I really represent the Somali community, and I'm the only Somali American in this audience asking the question. So I would like you to hear me asking this question again, because it is very important that you really understand. Again, Cedar Riverside is surrounded by roughly 2,000 youth that lives within 1 mile radius. We all know that both the right resources and education forms a perfect and successful community. We all know that investing in quality education and community resources offers more opportunities to become successful in the future. When you learn, you grow, you expand your horizon. As a future mayor, what is your vision and goal in investing in the Somali community? Underline the Somali community, especially the lack of resources around the youth.
Right. Okay. Well, you know, the truth is, if we take care of all our children will do well. But I'll tell you some specifics we can do with the Somali community. We have the Brand Call Center there. And we have the young people, you said like 2,000 young people. And right now, everybody's making annual yearly progress. Poor kids slide during the summer, middle class kids forward. Then they make annual yearly progress. Poor kids slide during the summer, middle class kids move forward. By the time they graduate, it's a 3, 4, 5 year gap. So we're going to have summer activities and summer school activities with enrichment programs for kids during the summer so that they will not have summer slide. They'll in fact make progress, and that gradually that achievement gap that's growing now every year will begin to be reduced. If we want to have children do well, they need to have more education, okay, longer school days, longer school years, more summer activities, more preschool activities, so that they are ready for kindergarten, and we keep pounding and pounding every minute of the day so that young people don't have idle time to lose traction and get off the education track.
Thank you. Our next question is going to come from the audience. The first respondent is going to be Ms. Jackie Cherryhomes, and the last but not least will be Doug Mann.
All right, so before they ask the question, before they answer the question, how many people have cell phones in the audience? How many have Twitter accounts? So if you're hearing something that you want to share with your networks, go on and tweet about it, because people need to hear the pros and cons of what you're hearing from our candidates here today. So please get your phones out and tweet. Hashtag 1MPLS. All right, so here's the question from the audience. Will you allow contractors to work in Minneapolis or Hennepin County who do not diversify their working staff?
I have a long history with contractors working in Minneapolis and requiring diversity. I will not forget the day that I was at the city council and Target wanted to build a big building downtown, and they didn't have an affirmative action plan. And they sat in my office and I explained to them that they wouldn't be building their building until they had an affirmative action plan. And they did that. All contractors in Minneapolis have to have diverse workforces, they have to guarantee it, and they have to provide jobs for people in our city. I currently work with Summit Academy on a number of projects, ensuring that our young people and other people are trained for jobs in our city, and our contractors need to ensure, and there need to be provisions in place and restrictions in place that ensure that they hire people from our community and from our city.
I think we need to have more than just affirmative action programs. The current enforcement just isn't enough. We need to have a program, an agency set up in the city whose mission is to detect covert illegal discrimination and to prosecute the discriminators. That's a big part of the reason why we have the big unemployment gaps, the big income gaps. That's a very important thing. We've had fair housing and employment laws since the late 1940s. They've never been seriously affected. Token enforcement only since the 70s.
All right, one Minneapolis. We've made it through one round. We've heard from each of our candidates so far. Are we feeling like we are getting some responsiveness, out-of-the-box answers from the questions? So fortunate for us, we have time and dedication and commitment from the candidates, so we're going to go for a second round. And we're going to ask more pointed questions and ask in return to have pointed answers and responsive answers. And I'm sure Dr. Nakima Levy-Pounds will make sure that those responses are to our liking. So we're going to ask her to turn it up just a little bit and make sure that we get the answers that everyone took their evening to come here to hear.
Okay,
all right?
And I'm going to ask the candidates to take your answers to the next level. People want to hear more specifics. This is just like Saturday night at the Apollo. It's a tough crowd. We don't have the hook, unfortunately, but we do have the power to intervene and ask you to be more specific. So who's going to be answering our next two questions?
Doug Mann. Mark Andrew. My apologies for pronouncing your name wrong the first time.
Jennifer?
Hi, my name is Jennifer Godinez, and I'm a supporter of all youth here. I'm a champion of dreamers. But we have a killer, a silent killer of dreams in this community, which is the overrepresentation of young, Black, and Native American and Latino youth suspended from Minneapolis public schools. It is a silent killer of dreams and it turns into the school to prison pipeline. So please address as mayor how you will end the overrepresentation of suspension rates, especially of young black men.
By the way, this problem has been studied and planned, and no progress has been made. We have a serious problem of systemic racial discrimination. We have schools where students of color are overexposed to inexperienced teachers and watered down curriculum. When you have a situation where there's such great disparities in the kind of resources you put in to the education of students, you can expect disparities in the outcomes also. We can't just blame poverty on this problem. Kids who are disadvantaged in the first place are even further disadvantaged by the environment created in the schools for them. So, you know, it's the civil.
I'm going to ask you to get to what you would do to address these challenges that Jennifer outlined.
Well, one thing I would do is we had a desegregation rule that sunsetted this year. It had an anti-discrimination provision that was never followed was never enforced by the state, never followed by the school system. It was supposed to address the inequalities. And I call on the school district to follow that and clean house.
Thank you.
My daughter, who went to mostly to South High School, came home with one of her friends one day, and they were wearing a pretty long face because her friend had been suspended. And I asked her why she'd been suspended, and she said, "I got suspended for skipping school." And that struck me as a pretty absurd situation. My goal as mayor, understanding the mayor isn't the superintendent, the mayor can't run the schools, but the mayor can do something very important. The mayor can engage when these situations happen and trace them back to the root cause of what causes these disproportionate suspensions in our school. Significantly, racism is an issue. Significantly, that's why the numbers are out of whack, because kids are getting thrown out of school for reasons they shouldn't be thrown out of school. But there also is a need for engagement between the city and the schools, and again the county, and maybe even the police if the circumstances around the suspension rise to that level. Training.
All right, next question. First respondent, Don Samuel. Second, Betsy Hodges.
Go ahead, Luz.
Hi, my name is Luz. I'm a dreamer. I'm part of the Minneapolis Youth Congress, and I'm also part of other organizations. And I've been involved too much with the community, especially in the Latino community. And my question is, if you get elected as mayor, what would you do to connect and actually take action to make a difference in the Latino community so that more students have the opportunity that could impact and increase graduation rates?
Thank you, Luz. And I was a dreamer of sorts. I came to the United States and on a vacation visa and applied for a student's visa. That was my strategy. And they said I was pulling a fast one, and they were going to send me home. So I was living in suspension for a whole year while I tried to appeal that thing. So I know the feeling. I know what it means to be working illegally in New York and going to school and thinking every cop is going to come get you. So I'm very concerned about the issues facing the Latino community. And I will do what I did at City View Apartments. I moved into a relationship with the soccer team kids there. Almost every single tenant in that 100-unit building is unregistered and undocumented. I moved into a relationship with them, let them give me a tour of their building that the city inspectors had neglected to inspect properly, and people were living with roaches and all kind of vermin, and moved in there with the relationship to transform the living conditions for those people. So I will continue that, to move into a relationship with the Latino and Hispanic communities and be a strong advocate for their needs that they have, that they say they have, and walk with them for change, for their families' quality of life and working conditions, and for their children academic life, and for their conditions on the street.
So we might have to dock you 30 seconds on the next response. Just kidding.
Well, I just want to ask Luz, do you feel that your question was answered adequately?
Kinda. No. Because it's a really big issue, not just for me, but for other Latinos that we don't see them right now because of the same reason, of the language barriers. So I really want you to answer my question, like, how would you connect, example, how would you connect to me if I come to you for being a mayor? How would you connect if I bring you thousands of my Latino community members?
Well,
how would you respond?
First of all, I'm going to have a Latino person in my office, okay, who speaks Spanish and is able to connect with the Latino community linguistically, and I will make sure that every department in the city is adequately equipped with language folks who are going to be able to communicate well with the people in the community, and that everything is done with the language barrier down, okay? And I'm going to personally move into a relationship with the community, and I make this pledge that I'm going to brush up on my high school Spanish so that I can become again fluent in Spanish and communicate directly.
Mr. Samuels, I do have a follow-up.
Yes.
Since you've been a member of City Council, what actions have you taken thus far to engage the Latino community?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to explain before. The North Side doesn't have a largest Latino community, and the only significant massing of Latinos that created a situation that required specific attention to that community was at City View Apartments. It's 100 units. It's a negligent landlord who reports people to NIS when they complain. They've even evicted people when they call 911. And the city had a lax attitude to what was happening there because people don't complain to the city because they're afraid of getting deported. So I called a meeting with the neighbors, with a local congregation, with two different congregations, Sanctuary Covenant Church, and another meeting with Ascension School, and tried to get, and had someone with interpreters there, and had them ferret out what was the problem. That's how come we found out what all was happening there. Then I set up a relationship with the soccer team, and those kids took me through the building. And then we had a Latino Spanish speaker go with the fire department through the building to make the residents feel at home, and so that they will complain. And we had that about 5 rounds of that before we could get people to be comfortable enough to say what was happening in their building, so they could get the kinds of inspections that would alleviate the unlivable conditions in their houses. That was me, one after the other after the other. There were no votes in that building for me at all. I am getting no political mileage out of it. It was just trying to make those children and their parents have livable conditions for their future.
Thank you.
So the question, as I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, a big part of the question that you're asking is, how will I interact with the Latino community, and if the Latino community or someone from the community comes to me about an issue in the community, how do I respond? Is that?
The question, once again, is what would you do to connect and actually take action to make a difference in the Latino community, so more students have open opportunities that could impact and increase graduation rates?
I'm going to answer that question in 2 ways. One, I'm going to tell you something that I did in general that wasn't specific to students, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about students. So I had some workers from Setul come to my office and talk about the working conditions they were facing. These are mostly Latino workers who clean buildings downtown, and they do not get paid, they get paid minimum wage, basically. And they are acting together in an unorganized, they're not union organized, to fight for conditions for work. And they came to my office and they said, these are the conditions we are facing, and we would like your help. So I did a few things. I mean, I was on the strike line with them. I went to the march, I went to the rally. But I also called the folks I know at the relevant businesses. I called the folks I knew at Target, and I called folks at the actual contractors who actually hire these folks. And I talked to them and did my best to get them at the table to say, look, you want to work with these folks because you do not want the, there's a word for it, an X-storm that's going to happen if they keep, you know, as we keep organizing. And it made a difference. They didn't get to sit down at the table, but attention started getting paid and things moved forward. That is the philosophy that I bring to the table. You come to me, I use all the relationships I have, I use the resources I have to get good things done for working people, for people of color, for the people of Minneapolis, because that's the future of our city. That's the future of our city, is those folks in Setul fighting hard for living wage jobs. That's the future.
One thing you said that we have to come to you. One thing that I would like to see is you guys coming to us in our community. Why do we have to come to you guys? It's if we are the people that are choosing you, you have to come to our communities and speak to us about our issues that we really want to address.
A quick response. Yeah, the quick response, and thank you for saying that. That is how I am campaigning. I am all over the city, and that is how I will govern. I do not expect people to come to City Hall when I am mayor. There are places that I will need to go, that I will spend time on a regular basis to meet with people. I will have people on my team who are the eyes and ears in City Hall, but I need to be out there being the eyes and ears in the community, myself and the people that I work with. And the follow-up story from Setul is the first time we came and met, they brought their issues to me. When I saw that the issue was continuing, I called up and I offered to make more phone calls, and I did. I called them.
All right, next question. First response from Gary Schiff. Second will be from Tony Lane.
Rich is going to ask the question.
Hey, my name is Rich Evans. I'm a South Minneapolis resident. And my question deals with the Step Up Summer Internship Program for youth. It's a great program. But the only problem is it doesn't always lead to permanent, long-term jobs for youth. My question is, how will you provide permanent and long-term employment options for young people of color in Minneapolis?
We should expand Step Up. We should get more employers engaged. We should make sure that when the employers are engaged, they also keep the option of internships for students throughout the school year, so that summer jobs turn into not just jobs, but open doors to careers. So I will set a goal of doubling the number of participants in Step Up, but also start a new path, internships throughout the school year. It is so crucial to be able to have an opportunity to work in a workplace for young people. I did it myself when I was in high school. I worked for a local newspaper and got to write stories. I'll never forget the opportunity I had to sit there at a desk. As boring as it sounds, I was on top of the world. And I'm going to fight for every kid to make sure that they all have opportunities, no matter what neighborhood they grow up in. Opportunities to enter into the workforce is the most crucial step we can take in order to help fight poverty and to fight the unemployment disparities in Minneapolis.
Mr. Schiff, could you be more specific about your plan to provide permanent and long-term employment options for youth of color? I've heard you say expand the Step Up program, create internships, but what about permanent long-term employment opportunities?
Well, if a student would like a permanent long-term job, I'm going to say it's a part-time job because you're in school the rest of the time. So if it's a part-time job, then we need to work with employers to make sure that youth have access to job training, youth have access to hiring programs, and I think schools are the natural part of partnership to make this happen. We currently right now with our job training programs are not very successful. 50% of the graduates are still unemployed 6 months later. And those programs are targeted to adults. So we have to reinvent and we have to refund and redouble our dedication to have job training programs that work for youth and for adults.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What you're hearing tonight is apologies from the status quo for what has existed and what will keep on existing. The question is for how we as working people, and I want to address that, to see things in class terms, our interests, and to break from that. Well, I'm for breaking with the status quo, for working people organizing ourselves independently. This thing about interns, when I grew up, interns wasn't heard of. The capitalists came up with this thing. This is how to get someone to work for nothing. It's BS. We should get rid of it, period. But the way we're going to get rid of it is that we, as working people, are going to start acting together. And I point to any example where that happens, whether it's a fight against attacks on immigrants, protests against police brutality, actions by workers, anything that gives us confidence. And as I said, what I would do as mayor is use the funds of the city to launch a real jobs program.
Next question, through the process of elimination, will be Jackie Cherryhomes first, and then Jim Thomas second.
This question is one that I would have written myself, but it came from an audience member. How many of you, as in the candidates, have people of color in key roles working on your campaign? And if you do, will you hire them on your staff if you are elected to office? So the request has come in for each of the candidates to answer this question.
I'll just pass the mic down.
So that everyone will be able to answer. I won't ask you to clarify. I will ask you to give your very best answer in 1 minute. Go ahead.
I have 4 people on my staff currently. Don't have a big staff. One of them is a woman of color, and I have 3 other women. But my volunteer group and my volunteer crew is largely people of color and women of color. That's who my predominant group of people is, and you see them here tonight in the red t-shirts. If you go to my website, you see pictures of people. My campaign looks like the city of Minneapolis. We have women of color, we have men of color, we have young people of color, we have a little bit of everybody, we have senior citizens of color, we have a large group, a diverse group that are working on this campaign. It is truly a grassroots campaign. I am not a top-down person. It's not a traditional campaign in any stretch of the imagination. It's a bottom-up grassroots campaign, and we ask everybody who's interested in being part of a true grassroots effort to join us. It's a big tent. We're building a giant tent, and there's room in it for everybody.
I love this question. Yes, I have people of color on my staff. If you guys want to stand up, the folks from Team Hodges who are here, if you guys want to stand up and wave. We also have folks out tonight who aren't here, who are out basically on the phones on behalf of the Hodges campaign, including an African American organizer on our team. I have queer organizers, I have young organizers. It's a diverse team. I am campaigning the way that I mean to govern. Mine was the first campaign with a Somali organizer, the only campaign with a full-time Somali organizer. For example, there's Osman. There he is right there. Some of you have probably gotten phone calls from him. The leadership of my team, sort of the brain, that is actually the leadership of my team. The advisory council on my team, many of them are the names that I read off at the beginning, and that is a very diverse group of people. Latino people, Native American people, African American, Somali, the whole 9 yards is on my team. That's how I'm going to govern. So the other question you had is whether or not I will hire these folks. You bet that my team at City Hall will look like my campaign team.
I don't have any paid staff. My treasurer is Farheen Hakim, who ran for mayor of Minneapolis. And she's acting as treasurer. She's doing my website, and she also sent some literature to the printer today, and I didn't get it in time. So, but that's not her fault. And I'll have, yeah. I think I have a pretty diverse group of supporters out there, and I'm encouraging y'all to help me out and get out the word. Thanks.
Hi, Jim Thomas once again. We have a all-volunteer organization, and yesterday Karen Boros of the Mann has asked me to submit a list of the 12 people endorsing me. I think she was looking for organizations, but right now I've not been pushing for that. But of the 12 people I put on the list, 5 are people of color, and at the city convention you'll see me introduced by a woman who's been a longtime friend of mine who's a Sudanese immigrant, and so I think we've got a fairly diverse group of people supporting me. Thanks.
Well, I'll make you a deal. If you hire an African American immigrant mayor, okay, if you're diverse enough to do that, then I promise you I will have the most diverse team in the mayor's office in the history of the city of Minneapolis. And I'm started out by having a diverse team. Abu Amara is one of my senior advisors, and he's already been hired in my office as an aide. And he's going to be my first hire as mayor of Minneapolis. Where's Abu? Is he in here? Oh, why don't you wave, Abu? All right. There he is, right there. My treasurer is African American. I have a very diverse team of immigrants, a lot of African immigrant folks from Somalia and from Nigeria and Liberia. And I have a very, very diverse team, and you're going to see something when you choose the most diverse opportunity you have, Don Samuels. Thank you.
Yes. Mike Griffin is an integral part of my campaign team. Where are you, Mike? All right. Son of a preacher man. But also, the first time I ran for city council, I was honored to have as my campaign co-chair Jeff Hayden. I hired Jeff in City Hall when I was elected, and today he's Senator Jeff Hayden. So I believe that politics is about developing leadership in the next generation. I believe that we all have an opportunity. That's why I've been running a bilingual office, Spanish and English, ever since I got to City Hall. And that's why my campaign is also going to reflect the diversity of the district that I've been representing for the last 12 years.
Thank you. And the answer is, but of course, everybody's campaigns ought to reflect the face of our city. 2 of my 4 co-chairs are people of color. Both of them are members of the Minneapolis School Board. Alberto Monserrati is a campaign co-chair. Kim Ellison is a campaign co-chair. Thank you, she's amazing. Our issues director is African American woman who's here tonight, who's incredibly important to our campaign. Our field director is a Pacific Islander, and he has a critical paid position in the campaign. In addition to that, we have 2 people in the Somali community who are deeply involved in the campaign, one a professional staff member, the other a volunteer who spends a great deal of time on the campaign.
Well, as I stressed through the comments I made tonight, the most important thing is for working people to organize ourselves and break from the rulers. What you have up here, as I said, is the status quo. And they'll say things about diversifying, but the real question is for working people to take action ourselves. And that's what I'm for, is working people acting. So the people who are part, I don't have any staff obviously, but the people who are part of our campaign are workers. And that's what needs to happen, is working people organize. Workers who are Caucasian, workers who are African American, workers who are Hmong, who are Latino. This thing about who you're going to get into City Hall with you, that's part of the conscious effort of the status quo to keep on drawing in layers in, to co-opt them in. What we're for is for working people organizing separately and giving confidence and power in our capacity to act in our interests and remake the world in the interests of working people.
All right, Minneapolis, we made it through 2 rounds. Are we feeling any better second round over the first round? A little bit better? Okay, let's hear it for our moderator, Dr. All right. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, all right, we're going to keep at it, people. We're at 10 to 8. We have more time for some robust questions, and thank you for candidates for hanging in there with us. This is the city you represent, and so we got to keep it real, and you guys keep it real with us. So
let's give our candidates a hand.
Yeah.
They probably didn't expect to be in the lion's den, but the reality is that the people here represent the future of our city. So if you can survive this test, then you can survive being our next mayor and hopefully thriving in that position.
All right, so next we're going to hear from first Mark Andrew, and then second we'll hear from Tony Lane.
Candace is going to present the question.
Hi, my name's Candace Montgomery. I'm a community organizer for Take Action Minnesota. And so my question obviously is very specific to the campaign that I work on currently. Working to close Minnesota's worst in the nation racial jobs gap by removing barriers for folks with criminal backgrounds to be able to get a job. This issue matters a lot to me. Every black man in my family who's above the age of 18 currently has a criminal background or is in jail right now. So, with that being said, Minneapolis is nearly 40% people of color, yet the city of Minneapolis employees from entry level to leadership positions do not reflect the growing population of people of color and people who live inside of this city. Thank you. So, my question for you is, what are your plans around removing barriers for folks with criminal backgrounds to access City of Minneapolis jobs? Right? So that's part one of the question. And then how will you ensure that the city is more intentional in reaching out to Minneapolis residents of color to fill those employment opportunities?
Thank you. As a person who worked as Hennepin County Commissioner with the Council on Crime and Justice when they were pioneers in addressing the question of allowing convicted people to seek and receive employment without discrimination, I strongly support that policy, in the city of Minneapolis. Don't even need to say any more about it. I support that very strongly. The challenge is going to be to get people of color into the city bureaucracy in jobs that match them. And we have challenges with that. You accurately point out we've got a long way to go in the city of Minneapolis. And these good people have made efforts to do that. They've run into challenges. You've asked about breaking down walls. I'll tell you what I did at the Hennepin County. As chairman of the Hennepin County Board of Commissioners, I instituted a policy with much more inclusive hiring practices, and it resulted in a substantial increase in the hiring of people of color at both senior levels in the organization as well as at the more junior levels. May I? Thank you. As well as at the more junior levels in the organization. What we need to do in the city of Minneapolis moving forward is making sure that we have the appropriate job opportunities that match the existing jobs, and that is a responsibility of the city to deliver that. So when we identify jobs that are available and open, the city is going to have to make an investment in proactively getting out there in the community. And if we don't find the appropriate skill sets for the appropriate job, we need to do a better job of actually delivering that training. Training is a very big piece of the future of increasing employment for people of color in the city of Minneapolis. We have to make an unprecedented commitment to it, and job number one is to start at home in the city bureaucracy.
I need to offer a quick follow-up, because this issue of criminal backgrounds being a barrier to employment for African American men is a serious one for the city. Part of it has to do with police accountability. Because of the increase of patrols of some of our poorest communities, what will you do to address that particular issue?
The police accountability issue?
Yes, and men who are arrested, some of them aren't even convicted of crimes, but those arrest records are serving as barriers.
Oh, they are serving as barriers. And obviously, you know, let's look at the numbers. There is a disproportionate amount of that happens in the police department. I will say what I've said before, we have to strip the veneer off this problem. There is inherent racism in our community. It exists in the police department. It exists with executives at companies. So we need to address that. With regard to the police department, they not only need to have an atmosphere, the job of the police chief, and this is very important because the mayor appoints the police chief. The job of the police chief, primarily number one, has got to be able to set a tone and set expectations. Number one is accountability. The police have to be accountable. Number two, there has to be humanity in their policies. I believe we need some training along those lines. And number three, accountability, humanity, and efficiency are all things that have to get built into that equation. We, again, are going to have to invest some money. I don't think it's going to be a huge amount of money, but we need to invest the money. We need to work with the police chief to assure that she is going to redouble her efforts. Her heart is in the right place. She has demonstrated that. I think we need to make sure she has the tools to make that happen.
Thank you.
I just want to start with the last remarks of the candidate. He says the police chief has the heart in the right place for the rulers. Witness what happened to Terrence Flagron, shot down in the beginning of May, and the city authorities, the council, the mayor, the chief of police continue to just backtalk on this. They have no answer. We're for prosecution of the cops who carried this out. I encourage you to, there's flyers here for a rally at City Hall next Thursday. I encourage you to come to it. He also mentioned the question of the city bureaucracy. All these candidates represent big government. That's not in the interest of working people. We don't need more and more agencies. We need working people ourselves to be organized and start to exercise control ourselves directly. Just on the job, on this question, you know, as I said earlier, can I have 20 seconds?
Wait. I'm gonna pause you. Specifically, how are you going to create access and remove barriers for people with criminal backgrounds to city jobs? Just only specifically answer that question, please. Just that.
Well, I wanted to speak to two things. I said I was campaigning for a jobs campaign, and two things that would be part of that. One is put an end to all this background check, the criminal background check BS. Secondly, as someone who's been active around the question of immigration, get rid of the E-Verify. these are things that stand in the interests of unifying working people. And and without question, it should happen in the city jobs as well. But I'm for across the board carrying out those sorts of action.
Okay, it was brought to my attention that because we did that one question for all candidates, Jackie Cherryhomes and Jim, you guys kind of got shorted on round 2. So what we're going to do is we have 2 more panelist questions, and then what we'll do with you 2 is give you each opportunity to answer any question that's been asked to another candidate, and you'll have 90 seconds to answer those questions after we finish these next 2 questions, and hopefully that'll make things right. Okay. All right, so moving along, we're going to try to get going here, keep it moving, so that we can get at least 3 questions before we have to break. So Doug Mann will be the next respondent, and Don Samuels.
Yeah.
Matthew.
Good evening. My name is Matthew McGlory. I'm a Northside resident. I'm also very active in my community. Historically, communities of color have had contentious relationships with the Minneapolis police force. Tysel Nelson, Fong Lee, and most recently, Terrence Franklin. If elected, what would you do as the next mayor of Minneapolis to ensure police accountability and to afford the Civilian Review Board with only civilians and subpoena power? And how would you also make that a real priority in your administration and not just be empty rhetoric?
The question on police accountability, you're asking where I stand on having a civilian police review board, and that's part of it. Well, I would support. I support having a civilian police review board that has its powers restored, the powers that were recently taken away, and additional powers given to subpoena police officers and have the power to discipline police officers. I also support the Communities United Against Police Brutality petition to get a ballot initiative to require police officers to carry professional liability insurance.
I think we did the right thing in appointing Janae Harteau as police chief. She is the first openly gay police chief, lesbian police chief, and her experience in the police department is given her a sensibility to the fact that things can go wrong and unfair even in the police department. She experienced that herself. And so, but everybody needs accountability. And so I plan to have a review, a thorough review of cases like this on an ongoing basis, so that we hold the police accountable for good discipline of police officers who violate, and that we really have a strong method of identifying police officers who are doing repeated acts of abuse, and that we hold those guys in check, and that they are accountable for their actions even before it comes to something like this.
So the question is being posed how, and then my other question is what have you done as a city council member to address this issue?
Yeah. Well, thank you. Now, there's a lot has been said about the gutting of the Civil Rights Department. I supported the current structure of the Civil Rights Department, civilian review, because now police and citizens are sitting together to argue about cases before they send it to the chief. And now instead of citizens getting together and coming up with a decision and sending it over to the police department to have it overturned, police and citizens are arguing back and forth about each case, giving each point of view, and then voting. And if there is a tie, then the chief can break that tie. But the chief is always going to break the tie because the chief is the boss. And so we have to elect a chief that we can trust. But once we elect them, we're going to have to keep that trust. And so I plan to keep the system the way it is. It's already starting to work, and you'll be hearing reports in the near future. Well, people can't fire and hire city staff.
There was a request for other candidates to answer the question. We'll leave that to you.
Are there any other candidates who are willing to answer the question? Okay, okay, wonderful. So you'll each have about 30 to 45 seconds, just as a matter of time. Go ahead.
Can I get a minute?
Can you do it? You need a full minute?
This is a big
problem. Not a political answer, but
this is a big problem in the city of Minneapolis. I'd like to talk specifics.
Okay.
As a council member who represents a racially diverse ward, I have handled complaints repeatedly. And I've been so frustrated to find out as a council member that the police don't want to hear my thought. The charter divide that exists today seeks to separate people who elect council members from accountability in our police department. I will change the city charter so that the police department reports to the full council and the mayor. This must happen so that every council member can have a seat at the table when talking about police accountability. I challenged the taser rules in the city of Minneapolis when the cops first wanted to purchase tasers. I wrote with Councilmember Gordon, use of force taser policy with our civilian review board. Those policies were thrown out after they were adopted by the city council because the explanation was given to me, the city council can't draft policy for use of force for the police department. This is a crucial problem that must be addressed. We need all hands on deck, and I will work with the entire city council as mayor to solve this problem.
No, you do not want the city council to take over that function. Because if we can't figure out who's running the ship with the mayor having control of that, try to figure out when 13 different people are trying to govern that. No, we're not going to do that. We are not changing the charter. We're going to change the way the system operates because there is injustice and inherent bigotry in that process. I definitely respectfully disagree with Councilmember Samuels that the police chief ought to have the tie-breaking vote in citizens review. No, we're not going to do that. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to look at developing subpoena powers for civilian review so they can get the real information as it comes in, although we need to warn ourselves that we're risking becoming a quasi judicial body. That's going to take more resources. We have to be very careful with it. Councilmember Cherryhomes did a great job concepting the idea of citizen review 20 years ago. You deserve a pat on the back for that. But the system doesn't work today. What we need is transparency. We need a different attitude in the police department. And I'm going to make a proposal. I'll make it right here. We need to sanction financially the police department if police brutality cases exceed a certain dollar amount or exceed a certain number of cases. Minneapolis has way too many of these. Money talks. We will sanction the department.
Police brutality.
So the young lady didn't have a microphone and brought it up to me during the last question that the women represent 25% of the candidates up here, and we're operating out of a random pick option. So that doesn't mean that they're going to get 25% of the mic time. This is our forum, our way, however we want to do it. If we want to come to a quick consensus, we can do that. If we want to shift that, we can shift that. I'm not going to give you the microphone. I'm not.
Why don't we pause for just a moment and allow them to answer this particular question, which is open to any of the candidates who want to answer. So if either of the two of you want to answer, please come grab the microphone.
I have long maintained that if you asked folks in the city attorney's office, separate from the folks in the civil rights department, separate from the folks in the police internal affairs division, who are the 25 to 40 officers who should be invited to pursue different careers, they would all independently come up with the same names. Who you elect as mayor matters. The chief of police reports directly to the mayor. With all due respect, in those decisions, the chief is not the boss, the mayor is the boss, and the mayor responds to all of you. Which is why these issues I have worked on since I started at City Hall. I did my best to make the CRA work inside the city. When Chief Dolan was up for appointment the first time, I got together with council members Gordon and Glidden, and we came up with a set of performance measures that were all about police accountability issues inside and outside the department. The second time he was up for appointment, I did not support him because he had not met those performance measures as regards the community and community relationships inside and outside the department. This is not acceptable in the city of Minneapolis. These police issues, I know they happen everywhere. They're not okay here. As mayor, this is going to be one of my top priorities because it speaks to the entire future of our city. If we are not a safe city, if people do not feel safe calling their police, if people do not feel safe calling their police. I did not support the current Office of Police Conduct Review, in part because there weren't enough firewalls between the civilians and the police, because there weren't enough. Now, the Police Federation went to the state government and gutted the law that existed that allowed for our civilian oversight the way it had been. In the absence of changing that law, we have to find a better way to have civilian oversight in the city. I think we can find something better than what we currently have. Councilmember Samuels is right. We're waiting on those reports for how the current situation is working. But you bet, police accountability issues are at the heart of what's happening in the city, and they will be at the heart of the work I do in my office, because it's been at the heart of the work that I do in my office. And I support justice for janitors.
Quite frankly, nobody up here has the relationship that I've had with the police department or with the Civilian Review Authority. I was there representing North Minneapolis the night Tysel Nelson was killed. I stood with Mayor Sharon Sales Belton, who is supporting me now, on the stage of North High when we had to address people and deal with the issue and deal with what happened. I was there. I was there with her when she appointed a board of people to study around the country what would be the best method to come up with civilian oversight. I supported the Civilian Review Authority. I supported it strongly. I was there in the council chambers that day voting on that. The day the cops sat there with us, they came marching in and they sat down, and on those wooden benches, each gun banged as they sat down. I remember that vote. That is critical to our city. We absolutely have to have a Civilian Review Authority that has subpoena power, that has power, and where the police chief is not the deciding vote. I understand these issues. I understand them personally. My husband's an African-American man who has been stopped in this city for driving around in his car. It happens to be a nice car, and he's been stopped in it. I understand what this feels like. I understand what this is about, and I understand that we have to have a police force that has true civilian oversight and accountability, and I will do that when I am mayor.
Hi, I think we have a system in place that does not represent our community, and until that changes, we're going to continue to have this kind of issue. I support the review board, and I would recommend that we look at having a mediator for that final vote. So we need to have honest discussions. I think we need police representation. We need to know what they're thinking and not exclude them from the process. But I think then we can have a mediator when the team cannot come to a consensus. Then we have somebody else that's unbiased kind of help us deal with the issue. And in terms of, we need to have our police force look like the rest of our city. And so we should be having programs where affirmative action kind of programs that people who live in the city, people of color, have an advantage when it comes to being hired as police officers, as fire people, as teachers. So we need to do that. Anyways, that's where I'm at.
I think people should understand that I think it's pretty clear to us today that the use of the cops and the increased attacks on workers' rights is not something just happening in Minneapolis or nice Minnesota, but across the country and what working people face internationally. Today, it just came out that the National Intelligence Service or whatever has been spying on everybody's phone conversations for the last 10 years or so. This is what we're up against. It's part and parcel of how capitalism rules. It dictates over us, and they're not going to give it up. What we have to fight for is to push them back. Having illusions that somehow we can reform the system in one city or something like this through a civilian review board, it's not going to work. It just ties us up into their system. What we need to do is get the greatest number of people on the streets and push them back. Make them feel our power. That's what we need. And in the long run, working people need to take political power and put an end to this system.
Thank you. That completes the round with that question. Okay. All right. Time crunch. We have a couple last critical questions. And let's see here. Jim Thomas. Betsy Hodges.
Shaka.
Greetings. My name is Shaka Kali. I'm originally from Los Angeles. I'm a community organizer working in the Phillips community, as well as a hip-hop artist on the Rhyme Sayers label, which is a local label in the Twin Cities. And I'm also working with tons of people in here to advance racial equity. So the issues around equity, as well as everyday people who have been systematically disengaged from the system is part of the work that I'm doing, and this group here represents that. The question I have is, recently the Seattle's Race and Social Justice Initiative gave a presentation for city leaders on their racial equity toolkit, which is used to assess how policies, projects, initiatives, and budget decisions benefit and burden communities of color. As mayor, how would you use this toolkit to achieve racial equity interdepartmentally?
How would I deal with that, the racial inequities interdepartmentally? I think the only way you can do it is you can have a plan of action, so you identify what exactly is the problem, what exactly is the inequity. Is that you don't have a certain number of people in the department that represents the community. And then at the end of the year, you have to score it. You say, okay, this is where we're at, and this is where we're going. And if it's important, then we need to have a plan to fix it then. So are we recruiting people that fit the bill in terms of the kind of jobs we're hiring? So when we have job interviews, are we looking at specifically? So as mayor, that would be one of the things I would do. I think we need to look at every department, look at our whole city, look at our schools, and say, we're not doing the job and hiring people that we need to. And we may not be doing the job we need to training people and having them have the ability to take the jobs. So we have to look at that. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the Seattle toolkit, so I can't address specifically what they've said.
Thank you for the question. I was honored to have Toki Wright as the DJ at our office opening on Sunday, so I appreciate that you are here. We, this past winter at the City of Minneapolis, we have our racial equity toolkit that we put in place. So it hasn't been in place that long. We're going to start getting updates on it this spring, and we're going to be getting them on a regular basis. But your question to me is, as a leader of the city, how am I going to use that toolkit to make sure that our city offices represent the entire city, right?
In terms of budget, so for example, hiring, any budget. So any budget that you do, before you move on that, you're taking into account how is it going to perpetuate or minimize already existing disparities?
Great question. I am chair of the budget committee. These are the questions I ask when the mayor presents the budget to the city council and as we move forward in our deliberations. In the past, what I have done in terms of just policy in general is see that, for example, the contract compliance unit in the Civil Rights Department didn't have enough people to do the work. I added money for more people in that job. That's a personal discretion as a council member about what I want to bring forward. As mayor, I will be bringing the budget forward. I will be looking at that entire budget with a lens of racial and economic justice. It has to start from there. The future of the city depends on us getting this right at every single level. And part of what will guide me is taking a look at the results from our toolkit to say which departments are we doing well in, which departments are we not doing well in, and what do we need to do to make that better. In this last budget, we hired 6 people to do workforce development. We're going to have a lot of retirements coming. Our workforce, there's going to be a lot of turnover coming in the next 5 to 10 years. So we hired 6 more folks in the HR department to help us do workforce development. And one of the things they're charged with, and one of the things that I'm going to make sure we follow up on, is that they are looking at the issue of the diversity of our workforce at the City of Minneapolis and putting that at the heart of the work they do as they do workforce development. It's another question about how we create in the environment plenty of people who are qualified for every job we have at the city. That's another question for another time, but that's also crucial work that the mayor has to spearhead.
How do you plan on engaging the communities that are most affected in this overall process?
Well, like I said, I'm campaigning the way I mean to govern. So I am having conversations all over the city with folks about what they're facing. It's helping guide my platform. It's why my platform is in development, is as I talk to folks, we need to do more. So as mayor, I will do that as well. I will have folks in my office who are dedicated community liaisons. Like I said, I need the entire community to have eyes and ears in my office. I need them to have eyes and ears in the community, but I need to be out in the community as well, talking with and engaging people. Since it's what I like best about campaigning, I think it's what I like best about governing as well. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you.
All right, all right. So, a little bit of change that we're going to do to get through this. We got one round of questions left. One more question. Excuse me. That's a round. One round. So what we're going to do is initially, in order to get through another question, we're going to have to cut the candidates' closing remarks. Not completely, but we're going to have to ask them to be limited and to respect the time so that the facility can close on time and then we can get out in an orderly fashion. So the next question is going to come from our last panelist, and it's going to be answered by Jackie and Gary.
Jonathan?
Hello, my name is Jonathan Ceballos. I'm working with Occupy Homes. The foreclosure crisis and recession caused by big banks has fueled a record high racial wealth gap. Not only were African Americans and Latinos targeted for predatory mortgages, but home equity constituted a relatively large portion of their wealth compared to other types of assets. Nationwide, median wealth has fallen by 66 among Hispanic households, 53 among black households, and just 16% among white households. The median wealth of white households is now 20 times that of black households and 18 times that of Hispanic households. These ratios are about twice as high as before the recession. It is hard to imagine the wealth gap could be any better in Minneapolis, a community with some of the worst racial employment and education achievement disparities in the country. In 2012 alone, communities in Minneapolis through St. Paul lost over $722 million in wealth due to the foreclosure crisis. Majority white communities lost $1,200 per household, while majority communities of color lost $3,800 per household. What will you do as mayor to hold banks accountable and reverse racial economic disparities caused by the foreclosure crisis? I'm not leaving my home until the bank negotiates a good faith. As mayor, will you ensure city police and resources are not used to assist banks carrying out unfair and unnecessary evictions like mine?
The police should not be used to be evicting people from their homes. Bottom line, there's other things to do. That is not what the police should be doing. I've spent a lot of my life working on predatory lending issues. I dealt with the first issue of flipping, the first issue of foreclosures. Foreclosures have affected me in a lot of ways. My next door neighbor went through a foreclosure. Many of my neighbors in North Minneapolis did. We need to work to ensure that people can stay in their homes. We need to work with the banks to ensure that modifications are able to be made. We need to raise up what Rose McGee did. Rose McGee is a hero. She stuck in there and she managed to save her home. We need to raise that up. We need to partner with organizations to ensure that people are able to stay in their homes. And then we need to work with those organizations that have good things going on to help people get into homes. Project for Pride in Living has a really, really wonderful new program to promote home ownership. And it works by starting, you sort of rent to own and then you move into your home ownership. We need to work with organizations like Build Wealth Minnesota that really help people prepare and build wealth and find an opportunity to buy a home. So housing is a huge issue. We need to deal with the foreclosure crisis. We can't sit in our neighborhoods with all these foreclosed homes sitting around us. We have to have a plan for them. And we need to ensure that our police are not used to evict people from their homes.
Thank you for being with Occupy Homes. Occupy Homes is a valuable organization that is saving homeowners every single day. And I have stood side by side with Occupy Homes. When police raided a home in my district, I called on the bank to reimburse the city of Minneapolis for the cost. I was the only council member to speak out, but then we worked with the police department to stop the raids. So our police department is not used in order to evict people from their homes. I also pick up the phone and I call the banks directly. I have sat in meetings with homeowners and the bank during renegotiations. I did it as a council member and I'll do it as mayor, and I'll make sure that the city has a staff to help homeowners who need advocacy when they're facing foreclosure. We also need to end dual tracking. We need to be a voice at the state legislature and in Congress, working with Keith Ellison and others in order to make sure that we are ending predatory lending in our community. I have been working to create more affordable housing in my district, including more affordable home ownership, and I will continue to do that as mayor of Minneapolis.
Thank you. We're going to go to closing. We're going to go to closing remarks, and we're going to ask the candidates to limit them to 60 seconds, 1 minute. And what I'm going to encourage everybody to do is we have the questions that you pose. We're going to keep those, but there's the One Minneapolis Facebook page where a lot of the candidates are already engaged with that page, and I want to insist that we take the conversation to El Pariso and to Facebook.
Yeah, the questions from the audience that did not get asked today will be posted on Facebook, and we're going to ask each of the candidates to take time to answer those questions. Is that all right with you all? All right, wonderful. So we're in the last leg of this race. You all have been a phenomenal audience. We thank our panelists for continuing to hang in there. This is a tough crowd, but a fantastic crowd. And I've been energized by the questions and the energy in this room because you represent the future of our city. So with that, I'm going to ask each candidate to take 1 minute to give your best closing argument to this wonderful audience. Why don't we start with you, Jackie?
I want to work with each and every person in this room to build one Minneapolis. One of the things I'm struck by as I travel throughout the city right now is how we are not one Minneapolis. We're 4, 5, 6 7, maybe 13 Minneapolises, and we won't be a strong city until we are one Minneapolis. The issues we talked about tonight are not issues that I'm strange to or that are strange to me. They're the issues of my neighbors, and they're the issues of my family. I know these issues, I understand the issues, and I want to work with you to build a strong city. I know how our city works. I understand how to get things done. I will work hard as your mayor to ensure that we build one Minneapolis. I come at this with the head of an insider and the heart of an outsider. I ask for your support as mayor, and together we will build a strong city that works for everyone.
Want us to just go down the line? Well, my instinct is often to start this sort of thing with a quote or something in my head. The one that's in my head is that racial equity is the standard for government effectiveness. Yeah, it is. One of the other things I've been told on this campaign is that I don't tell my own story enough, so I'm going to tell you a little bit of my story in the last 41 seconds. Because these issues are personal to me. I have been working on these issues my entire adult life. It's been my vocation, my avocation, the thing that I do. I am married to an African-American man. Many of you know him, Gary Cunningham. He's done some work in the community. And with that marriage came 4 grandchildren and 2 African-American grandchildren who are in the Minneapolis public schools who live here in the city. These issues are personal to me. These are 2 black boys in a city where the outcomes for black boys are not equal. And the things that we are doing to help them thrive and succeed are things I want everybody to be able to do, but not have to do for fear of that inequality. It's a personal story to me. I don't tell it much, and I haven't told it often, but I've been told I should start telling people the truth about my story and who I am, so there it is.
Yeah, I want to restate the theme of my opening statement. We have a problem with systemic racial discrimination driven by law and public policy in this country, and big issues that we can use the city's power to address would include pulling back from the drug wars, reducing enforcement of the drug laws, especially those that most people don't think really involve any crimes. You know, we need enforcement of fair housing and employment laws, meaning an agency that is whose mission is to detect illegal discrimination and prosecute the discriminators. And we should not tolerate a school system that is grossly unequal and separated by race.
Hi, I think we need a bold vision for Minneapolis in terms of housing, in terms of employment, in terms of access and youth of health care. And I think we need to have the mayor measured every year on what kind of job they did in reducing homelessness, what kind of job the mayor did in terms of making sure we have access to health care and use of health care. And what kind of performance have we done in terms of supporting our schools? What kind of performance have we done in all these areas we've talked about, and then measure it. And then I want the mayoral candidates to also answer some specific questions about what they think about what we're doing with schools in terms of teaching to tests, high class sizes in many of our Southside schools, in terms of bringing people in who've only Teach for America people who have 5 weeks of training. How do they feel about that? What do you think about the teachers' seniority system? What do you think? You know, I didn't get my last question, so can I take another minute here? Okay. So a lot of these candidates are spelling out the position, but many of them aren't. Education is listed as the second most important thing in Minneapolis behind public safety. I have some ideas of how to improve our school system. But most of the improvement will come from kids having a place to live, a place to lie their head. 10% of the kids don't. adequate health care. Their parents have jobs. Love to talk to you more about that, but ask all the other candidates where they specifically stand on some of these other issues I've talked about. Thank you very much.
Now you've heard a lot of my opponents talk about the achievement gap and the employment gap and all the other gaps. I don't just talk about it, I live in the gap. And I live in the gap definitively and directly and voluntarily. I just left the opening of a beautiful apartment building along the river. And of all the guests there, I was the only black person. And there must have been about 150 people there. So the gap doesn't just exist in our school system, it exists at the highest levels. And I want to be the leader of reducing and obliterating those gaps, not just to end suspensions. That's great. But we're going to go beyond ending suspensions. That every class in Minneapolis is going to have young African-American boys and girls, young Somali and Latino boys and girls raising their hands and answering every question because the teachers have been taught how to teach our children. We're going to apply everything, and if it doesn't work for the children of the low-income minority communities, it doesn't work for Minneapolis. And that's a new standard under my leadership.
I've been working for economic and social justice since I was 18 years old when I came out. And ever since then, I've been working with a diverse community as a progressive activist to make progress. I've worked with Occupied Homes to make progress. I took on Excel Energy when they wanted to put high voltage power lines in the Phillips neighborhood over the Midtown Greenway. We won, and we're making progress. I have been working on youth poverty issues. I've been working to keep our kids safe. When you look at the 9th Ward, no one has had more park investment. 1 new park, 2 new park buildings in just the last 6 years. The work that we can make together as progressives is amazing when we come together. We have an opportunity with this election to bring together progressives from all over the city and fight for the election of a mayor who will work with neighborhoods to make progress, to work on a progressive agenda, and I ask for your vote. Thank you.
I started out as a take to the streets community activist in the anti-war movement at the end of the Vietnam War. I went from there to developing a number of major programs. First president of MPIRG as a community organizer. When I came of age and got elected to public office, I became a coalition builder and learned how to channel my incredible passion for justice into positive outcomes. I created the recycling program that every one of you participates in today. I created the Midtown Greenway and built a coalition with the park board, the city council, the county board, and even the school board to develop that program and pay for it. And today there's hundreds of millions of dollars of economic development on the Greenway and jobs. I worked on a number of other issues as a pioneer for light rail transit. And if I am elected mayor of our city, you have my heartfelt commitment. I will never lose the passion and anger of a community activist, but I will govern as a collaborator. Thank you.
I started my remarks by talking about what's happened over the last 6 or 7 years. One of the gains for working people coming out of the crisis is we can see more starkly what we're up against. I call it the dictatorship of capital. And for us to start to see our class interests in the world, not just in Minneapolis. There is no way to get a one Minneapolis because there are different contending class interess. I'm for working people organizing to advance our interests and seek to fight for putting working people in power, but to take action in the fights that are happening today and through that gain a better sense of our capacity and what we can do. Working people in Cuba toppled the dictatorship and started to chart a course forward. They they revolutionized their society from top to bottom in the middle of a war. You know, when they were fighting the Batista dictatorship arms in hand, they set about building a new society, organizing education and healthcare. That's the sort of course that working people need to take in this country.
Wonderful. This brings us to the end of the One Minneapolis Forum. I want you all to give yourselves a round of applause. I just tweeted about how awesome you were as an audience. I think that this should be a new standard for forums where people want to govern a community as diverse as this one. I'd like to thank all of the organizers of this forum. They put in so much time, energy, and resources to bringing us all here today. I'd like to thank all of the candidates for mayor. And please don't forget to go out and vote. You have the power to affect change by choosing the next leader of our city, so that instead of being the worst of times, it'll be the best of times going into our future. Thank you for everything. I'd like to turn it over to Henry, who's going to close us out.
Okay, 30-second announcement real quick from Take Action.
Yo, hey everybody, my name's Justin Terrell. I'm the program manager for the Justice for All program with Take Action Minnesota. We're a statewide people's organization. We believe people belong at the center of our government. We also believe that people need to have better relationships with our corporate citizens. So ask me what I'm doing next week. I'm flying to Denver because Target doesn't have their shareholder meeting here in Minneapolis anymore. And I'm taking 20 people with me, and we're going to invite Greg Steinhoffel, who makes $13,000 an hour, to come to our community and hear why they should partner with us to hire people from our community to work at their organization.
All right, I wanted to personally thank Merjan Sardar, Jenny Locke, Ishmael Israel, Nimko Ahmed, and Jeff Nilika, who were part of our committee doing this. It's our first, but it's not our last. And then one more thing. You know, we're not looking for a savior here, just so you know. We're looking for somebody to partner with us to make sure that we address our own problems. Please join us at El Paraíso on 35th and Nicollet. The candidates will